Welcome, everyone. And this is the daily market wrap, the biggest charts in 30 minutes. Now, I just want to remind everyone that if you want to support what we do at DeFi University, hop on over to defiuniversity.xyz, take a look at what we do over there. And just remember to like, share, and subscribe over here on YouTube, on X, on whatever, Kick, whichever platform you find this content on. We would really appreciate that. So let's go ahead and take a look. Big moves out of Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, all of the digital assets over the weekend. And so the first thing that I want to do here is zoom out because we've been talking about this pattern for weeks now. So this is a bear flag, this pattern right here on BTC, and that bear flag is starting to confirm. So this pattern is the flag. This is the bearish flag. We got that breakdown right there 2 weeks ago. And over the weekend, things really accelerated to the downside. So if I zoom in to a daily and I take a look here, notice when this level of support broke, I'm going to go ahead and highlight this with an arrow. When this level of support broke, it became resistance. Notice how it acted as resistance on the retests right here. So a couple of days in a row, one test rejected. A second test rejected. This third test didn't even make it back up to resistance, and then we got the waterfall. And that waterfall began on Thursday and really accelerated over the weekend session during a period where you've got some thin liquidity. So what do I see here in Bitcoin now that we've gotten down to my first target at 75K? Well, number one, I think that it's pretty clear that Bitcoin has entered a bear market. So for us to think about what Bitcoin is going to do in this bear market, it's probably a good idea to understand a little bit about what Bitcoin has done in previous bear markets, wouldn't you say? So let's see here. I need to restart in order to be able to get my moving averages working. So we're not going to do that right now. But what I can tell you just by drawing this on here is there are two moving averages that are really important for us right now when it comes to BTC. The first one is the 50-week. So that was the signal for the start of the bear market. And that took place when Bitcoin broke 102K. So that was the trigger for the beginning of the bear market. Now, this next moving average, all the way down here at the 200-week. So this 200-week moving average has acted as support in every previous Bitcoin bear market. So I would expect that even though I think the 75K level holds as support, and we get a little bit of a bounce here out of BTC over the next couple of weeks, even though I think it holds as support, I think eventually Bitcoin heads down here to 60K. So that is the target for me, just like, for this bear market. I think that, Bitcoin at 60K makes sense. And, right here, these highs from last cycle, 60 to 67K in this region, that makes sense. And if I measure from the all-time high down to, let's just say 60K, 50%, that would be the most shallow Bitcoin bear market ever. So with the institutional adoption, maybe that makes sense that yes, we're in a bear market, but it's a more shallow bear than previous bears. So with that piece of analysis there, we're going to go ahead and take a look at some alts. I want to take a look at Ethereum, Solana, Sui, Link, and a handful of others. Maybe AVAX, XRP, Hype, and Tau. And the reason why I want to take a look at those is if it's true that Bitcoin has entered a bear and it probably has a little bit more room to the downside before it finds a bottom, well, then that likely means that none of these alts have bottomed either, not yet. And so if we take a look here at ETH, what do we have going on here for Ethereum? Well, number one, you got this level of support. So this level right here, this was the Iran strike low for ETH, and then it went on that monster tear. So that was the level of support. And look at where ETH bottomed just, over the weekend. Very, very close to that level of support there. So I would expect that ETH would be able to bounce, hopefully for a couple of days, maybe longer than that. I'm looking for a bounce here out of ETH, but as of right now, it's just languishing near the lows. 23.35 is what it's trading. So, it's got to stay above 21.30. That is the level of support. Now, here's the thing. Even though I think that this level of support holds for the immediate term, maybe the next couple of days, hopefully the next couple of weeks, I do think eventually it breaks. And if or when that level of support breaks, where's the next level? Well, down here in the 1600 region. And so the way that I've drawn in this level of trend line support is very simple. I just went ahead and anchored this to the bear market lows from last cycle, the 2022 bear market lows in ETH, which came in around $900. So that bear market low connected to the next higher low, which was the tariff tantrum low from this past April. And then I just extended that trend line out to the right. And so what you got now is a level of long-term trend line support below and horizontal support above. So that's two levels for ETH that I think will be important in the coming weeks and months. But all I'm looking for right now is for there to be a little bit of a rally. And so on the upside, a rally might find resistance here at roughly 2,600 or so. So I will be closing my longs if I can get up to like 25 and change, something like that. So just looking for a little bit of a bounce here out of ETH, led by Bitcoin, looking for Bitcoin to bounce here. Let me just go ahead and draw in where you might see some resistance out of BTC, maybe somewhere around right there. And then for Solana. Now, Solana is a little bit different. This pattern's a little bit different here. So I think that Solana doesn't have the same fundamental foundation that maybe Ethereum does or even Bitcoin. It hasn't seen the DeFi TVL that Ethereum and its layer twos have. And that Solana Seeker phone was really underwhelming. I have one and I don't know, it's just it's not what I was expecting. So this level of support here, it's also very inflationary. Solana is. It is very fast, I'll give it that. But, as far as holding the actual token, I just want a better price. I think $104 isn't a very good price. So I'm looking here at $96. And if that breaks, which I think it probably will over the next couple of weeks, then there's really no support below. I mean, very poor support. You could say that, this level might be some type of support right there around like 76 or so. What is that, 79? You could say that that's some support. You could also say that maybe right here, what is that, like 67 is some support, but those are really weak levels of support. I think that Solana, if it breaks 96, I think it heads in a hurry down to like $30 or $40. And so the reason why I'm giving myself all of these targets for these, I think high quality altcoins, even though I may have some, squabbles with Solana about being inflationary or DeFi TVL or whatever, I think that this project isn't going anywhere. I think they're going to continue to build and they're going to continue to make it better. And if I get an opportunity to buy it at $40, I'm going to back up the truck and definitely buy some SOL down there. But I think it's too early. I'm buying it right now for a trade, with no leverage, just thinking that, hey, it's a little bit oversold, it probably bounces. That's my thought process right now. So let's go ahead and move on from Bitcoin, ETH, and SOL. Let's take a look at Sui, another smart contract platform. This is an American smart contract platform, America. So if we just take a look at this, 50 cents on Sui, that seems to make sense to me as an important level of support. But there's no reason to think that that needs to hold. You see, Sui is a much lower quality token, in my opinion, than Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Solana. So even if Sui gets down here to 50 cents, there's no reason to think that that would necessarily be like the bear market low for Sui. It could definitely go much lower. So, you might be talking about Sui at 35 cents, something like this. down there, 35 cents. That could be an interesting level, but I would start buying it around 50 cents. I think that makes sense. So $1.14 for SUI. This pattern, notice this big trend line support, and when it broke on October 10th, that's pretty close to where I expect SUI to go to. Now, the breakdown, this here created when we started building out this, it looks like a megaphone or maybe an expanding wedge. Both of those patterns, by the way, very bearish. And so this breakdown here, I think it's just getting started. But I wouldn't necessarily want to get short after such a big and violent move to the downside. I'm just waiting for a little bit of a bounce, maybe like 10 or 15 percentage points. Maybe it gets back up to like $1.25, something like that, maybe $1.32. So I could just go ahead and throw down a horizontal here, something like this. So $1.25, $1.30, that would be an interesting short entry for me in SUI. But there's no reason to think that we get up there. It definitely could just roll over. It really depends on what Bitcoin and ETH do, I think. So SUI, I will definitely be buying this spot if it gets down into the 30 cents, 40 cents, 50 cents region down here. So I'm going to go ahead and actually highlight that because I've got those zones on many of my other charts, and I just want to keep this in mind for the rest of this year, basically going into the summer where I want to be picking up SUI if I get an opportunity down here, like 37 to 53 cents, something like that. Okay, Link. This is actually, a very, very useful protocol, a high quality protocol. It's used in just about everything in DeFi. And I don't think this is going anywhere. I think that the Link token, I really need to dig into the tokenomics of Link because the most important thing for me is cash flow. And, does this protocol generate enough free cash flow? And is that cash flow returned to token holders in some way? So I have some work to do on that. But aside from that, this level right here, the flash crash lows at $8, that level I think is probably the next stop for Link, but I wouldn't open a short on it right now today. Instead, just like the other tokens that we've taken a look at so far during tonight's call, I would wait for a rally. So for Link, you've got this really beautiful level of trendline support. I can make this a little bit better here if I just connect the dots. There we go. So notice you got the anchor point here, the next level here, and support, and support, and support, and it broke. So when it broke, this level of support becomes resistance. So if we just go ahead and zoom in here a little bit, this is a daily chart. So on a rally, I would think about opening a short position right here. So right at 11:45, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I really like Link. I would like to be able to stack some Link, but just not yet. So I'm waiting for this rally to continue up to $11 or so, and then I'll open some more shorts on Link. I closed my shorts on Friday. I actually missed this. I'm kind of pissed about that. So I'll wait to open some shorts at $11, but if Link breaks below 8, then I think take a look at this zone here. This was basically the bear market carving out a trough in Link. I could actually move this up. So this is all of this activity here. This is going to be, I think, significant support for Link, but it wouldn't surprise me if it gets down to the bottom of this level, because look at that. There has been plenty of trading activity in the past below $5 for Link. So if I get an opportunity here to buy Link in this zone, in the bottom third of this zone, I'm going to take it. So, something between like 4.5 and maybe $6.50 on Link, I think that makes sense right there. So if I get an opportunity sometime, maybe this summer, to buy Link down there, I'll be buying spot and just stacking spot. So AVAX, let's take a look at AVAX. Another one of I like AVAX. I've always liked the Avalanche chain. Always interesting opportunities there. And, the thing is, though, this pattern looks very sick. If you just zoom out here, I can remove this. We can make this a little bit cleaner. But this zone here, that is the level of support I want to highlight. So that level right there. So that $11.30 level, that was an important level of support. Notice we got 2 touches of that level of support. And then when it broke, you got the waterfall. So that's the first touch. And right here, that is the second touch. 1, 2, and then the waterfall. So if we get a retest of this level, which is now resistance, this $11.30 level is now resistance. If we get a retest of this level, that's an interesting opportunity to open a short position on AVAX. So I think that there's probably more rally ahead. I certainly hope that there is more rally ahead, just to get back some of what was lost over the weekend for a lot of these tokens. But if it doesn't rally, then the next level of support below comes in at $8.60 from right here. And these levels here, that's from all the way back in 2023. That was at the start of the bull market. So that is the level of support to watch. And if AVAX is unable to hold $8 and change, $8.50, then I think the zone that it would head to would be down here, maybe, $5 or something. So if I get an opportunity to buy AVAX, I'll actually be buying it a little bit higher. I think that this zone here makes sense. And then maybe down to that bottom there. So I would probably start buying at 8 just to dip my toes in the water. And if it breaks, then I would wait for it to get back down here to like $5 or so. And I'd be a buyer at 5. So I'm going to go ahead and move that up right there. So that's my buy zone for AVAX. So let's move on from AVAX. Let's move over to XRP. And XRP, now that it's broken down, see that level of support there? Now that XRP has broken down and also importantly, broken below this wick low. So that tells me that this wick low is not support. So now that this has broken down, the next target is the October 10th flash crash lows, which come in at $1.26. But ultimately, I think that XRP goes back down to 60 cents. And I'm going to change the color of this because I am not buying XRP. No way. This token doesn't do anything. This is a meme coin. So I'm not going to buy it. But I will get short. And I'm just waiting for another entry. I closed my XRP short a little bit too early. So I think that if we get a little bit of a bounce, just like the other tokens, a little bit of a bounce, I'm going to open another short position over here on XRP. And the target for me, the first real take profit would be down here at $1.25. But I think this is something that you can ride all the way down to maybe 60 cents down here. Notice all of this activity here, right around 60 cents, I think is where I think that's where XRP heads at some point this year. Maybe by the late summer, we see XRP down there. But yeah, this doesn't do anything. This is like a straight up meme coin. So let's move on over here to Hype. Now, Hype is the exact opposite of a meme coin because the Hyperliquid protocol generates a shit ton of free cash flow, and they return that cash flow to token holders. So I thought that XRP would bleed, or that Hype would bleed out after this rally, but it has not. And if we zoom in here, take a look at these wicks. So we got the breakout above this level of trend line resistance here. Notice the anchor at the all-time highs connected to the next lower high, extend to the right and down. And when Hype broke out above that level of resistance on the retest, you see all of those wicks right there? That is bullish. So that means buying pressure, like holding support, buying pressure. So this actually does look kind of like a bull flag. If I grab my brush here, you see this flag? There's the pole, down sloping, holding support. If this confirms, where would we expect Hype to move to? Well, a measured move would be something like this. Measure from the base of the pole to the top of the pole, add that to the top of the pole. So maybe in the mid 40s, something like this. up here in the mid 40s could make sense for hype. And that would be a contrarian play, as if the rest of crypto doesn't rally, but Hyperliquid does, what that would tell me is the investors who are buying the hype token really care about the cash flows being generated on Hyperliquid, the perp stacks. So that is something that's extremely important. Why don't we take a look at another token that seems to be outperforming? Canton. Canton. So this is a beautiful cup with handle pattern. And importantly, the handle is downsloping. So beautiful cup with handle pattern. This is basically textbook. And then you get the go. And so the measured move would bring Canton up to 30 cents. So that's a big, big move for Canton. Now this, unfortunately, it's a little bit more difficult to own this in a DeFi wallet. The only wallet that I've seen that allows you to own this token without trading it on a centralized perp DEX is something called Braun. But I haven't dug deep enough into the way that they custody this. I think it could just be an off-chain, like synthetic that they, allow you to custody in their wallet, meaning that it's really not a token that you hold. So yeah, but this looks interesting to me. This is a great looking pattern. So let's just go ahead and remove some of these trend lines here, some of those horizontals, so we can make this a bit cleaner. And so this would be the level of support to watch for Canton. So if this just rips, then all I would do is extend this out and wait for it to find this level of support. So if we get a big move higher, I wouldn't buy the big green bar. I would wait for the retrace back down to support. So that would look something like this. If Canton breaks up, then I would wait for the retrace and I would be a buyer right here, something like this. Or you could buy right now and set yourself a very tight stop below on a break of this trend line support. So I quite like this though. I quite like Canton. The pattern looks great to me. And this is basically one of those walled gardens. I think this is JP Morgan Chase, one of their walled garden chains. I think this is made to work with Connexus, like an institutional type chain. I believe that our repo, they're going to move repo activity over to Canton over the next 24 months. So here's Tau, switching gears a little bit, TAO. And, this is actually one of my favorite projects just because it's such a cool project. And, in DeFi University earlier today, during one of the live sessions, we were talking about, and one of our members was talking about his experience using Shoots. And so Shoots is a subnet of BitTensor Tau that allows you to purchase AI compute. And it's a little bit cheaper than Google or AWS, Amazon's product. So this is a very interesting protocol. And if we just take a look at this, this pattern, notice right here, back in 2024, that was an important level of support there at $170. Also, the tariff tantrum lows, Tau came down and tested $170. And so now that Tau has broken down, if we just zoom in a little bit here and take a look at this, now that Tau has broken down below that level of support. So I can just go ahead and highlight, there's the support, there's the retest, there's the breakdown. So Saturday was the breakdown. And then during the session today, notice where Tau found resistance at where the support used to be. So when support breaks, it becomes resistance. And that's exactly what we saw here today. So price got rejected at resistance. And if this continues to the downside, that $170 level, that is long-term support. So that would really need to hold for Tau. Now, just think about this. If you're viewing Tau through the lens of what Bitcoin might do over the next several months, if it's true that Bitcoin has entered a bear market and has been in a bear market basically since October, November-ish, well, then Tau probably hasn't seen its low for this cycle yet. So I'm thinking that Tau would be a bargain down here between $30 and $90, something like this big zone down here. Look at all that trading activity back there. So if $170 breaks, then I'd be a buyer. I'd start buying under $100 for Tau, like at 90. And I'd be a buyer in this zone here. I quite like this project. I think this is a very interesting protocol, and I would love to see it continue to survive. So this is something that I have on my watch list. Just, over the next several months, I think I'll have an opportunity to pick up some Tau at 90 bucks. Let's take a look here. Maybe we can go down the list a little bit. How about something like Aave? Let's take a look at Aave. So this level of support that I drew in for Aave, this isn't exactly like a decent trend line or anything like that. What I would want to do is something like so. Okay, you see that? So Aave is sitting at trend line support, just sitting right there, hugging trend line support right now, and almost broke down. So this is an important level of long-term trend line support for AAVE, Aave. Break this, fail this at like 117 or so. If that fails at 117, let me just highlight that. Then where's the next level of support? Well, it would come in at the flash crash lows at 80, but that's not really a solid level of support. I think it's more something like a zone. So like between 45 and 80, something like that. I like Aave. It's one of my favorite protocols. It is just a phenomenally useful protocol. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw down a buy zone in here for AAVE. I'm going to go ahead and change that color to green. There we go. So if or when this fails, I'll be a buyer, right here at 80. I'll be buying down to like 50. I like Aave, and I'm just going to buy spot. That is the goal, to pick up my favorite digital assets spot and be able to hold them for the next cycle. So I'm just going to go ahead and curate that watch list a little bit there. So SUI, Link, AVAX. I'm not really thinking about buying hype, but maybe. I'm going to go ahead and throw Tau up there, Aave up there, and I might actually buy hype. I'm not convinced that their cash flows will continue from perps like that. They need to launch some new products. I mean, the moment that there's a liquid options protocol on chain, it's going to take all of the perps trading volume, and all of those fees will go right to that options decentralized exchange. I think it's just a matter of time until someone launches that. So with the final 2 minutes that we have, let's take a look at gold and silver. Look at this move from gold. Big bounce, clinging to support here. If I go ahead and fix that trend line just a little bit. So look, what goes up must come down. But gold found support here at the trend line. So it could be that maybe we see a move back up to 5K. I think you'll know that if gold can get above just the last session's high. So that would be technically important. So if that 49.05 level, let me go ahead and mark that. You see the top of this wick from the last session's candle? If gold gets above that level, then it has a shot at 5K and going all the way back up to those all-time highs. So that will be an important level. Now, if gold fails to break above the last day's highs, then it probably comes back down here and just tests this support again. Let's take a look and wrap things up with silver. Now, this is one hell of a chart, man. Like, you don't see this every day. This is what you see like in meme coin land, but you typically don't see this for, an asset class like silver. So what a rally, a parabola here. But of course, what goes up must come down. And the same logic holds for silver. If silver can break above the previous session's highs, then maybe we enter this zone again. If it is unable to do that, then you've got to start looking at yesterday's lows, last session's lows. So this is basically the zone that silver is going to carve out or trade within until it breaks out one way or the other. So if it breaks down, then I think we might be headed to $55 for silver. If it breaks out, then at least there's more time up here in this big old region. This is very difficult to analyze from a technical perspective, because of the parabola. The parabola makes it a little bit more difficult. Sometimes when I see a parabola like that, I like to throw down a Fibonacci, just like a retracement, something like this, and see if there are any other levels. So usually the 618 is the most important level. And it just so happens that that 618 comes in close to where we found some resistance during yesterday's session. So this 618 level, I think, is an important level of resistance now for silver. Where's the important level of support? At the 382, something like this. So if I just go ahead and remove this now we've got a couple more levels of support. So you've got the 318 or something. So you've got $63 as support for silver and above $87 as resistance. So I think it'll just trade in this zone until it breaks out one way or the other. So, hey, this is, I'm not touching this one for a little while. I'll be a buyer down here at $50, but not up here at 83. So what an interesting asset though. Alrighty, everyone. I really appreciate you all for joining this call live. It's always a pleasure to be able to, talk charts and run through this stuff with everyone. So if you don't mind, like, share, subscribe, head on over to DeFiUniversity.xyz, take a look at what we do in the School community, and I will see you all tomorrow.